First contact protocol gone wrong. Senior Research Director Vexna stared at the holographic display with all four of her optical organs, trying to process the information before her. The designation, Deathworld 372, floated mockingly above the image of a beautiful blue-green planet. This has to be a classification error, she chittered to her second-in-command, Zytok, whose crystalline exoskeleton shifted colors in agreement. Look at these readings: liquid water, breathable atmosphere, moderate temperatures. It's practically a paradise world. The classification comes directly from the ancient archives, Director Zytok responded, their voice resonating through crystalline chambers. And it's not just classified as a death world. It's rated Category 5, the highest danger level in the database. The research vessel, Eternal Curiosity, hung in the darkness of space, just beyond the orbit of the gas giant the natives called Jupiter. They had spent the last 3 cycles studying the solar system, trying to understand why such a seemingly hospitable planet would carry such an ominous warning. Pull up the specific hazard ratings again, Vexna ordered, her dorsal spines rippling with frustration. The holographic display shifted, showing a list that made absolutely no sense to her decades of cynobiological experience. Indigenous dominant species rated as extreme hazard despite being Class 2 technological development. Survival capabilities labeled as impossible, yet observed. Warning note: species thrives on poison stimulants, considers apex predators as companion animals, and exhibits high resistance to psychological warfare due to self-inflicted information chaos. She read aloud, her translator struggling to convey the ancient warnings. Zytok's crystalline form flickered with amusement. The last part refers to something called social media. Director: our preliminary scans show they voluntarily subject themselves to constant contradictory information streams for entertainment. Fascinating, Vexna murmured, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. And disturbing. What kind of species deliberately creates chaos in their own information networks? Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's emergency alert system. A junior researcher, Mira XE, rushed into the observation deck, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with excitement. Director: we've been detected, Mira XE announced, their tendrils wavering in agitation. The humans have spotted our cloaking field distortion against Jupiter's background radiation. Impossible, Zytok stated flatly. Their technology isn't advanced enough for. They used something called an amateur astronomer network, Mira XE interrupted. Thousands of their civilians point primitive optical devices at the sky as a hobby. One of them noticed our gravitational lensing effect, posted it on their information networks, and their collective problem-solving abilities did the rest. Vexna felt her spines flatten against her body in shock. This was unprecedented. Most species at this technology level barely looked beyond their own atmosphere, let alone maintained global networks of civilian scientists who could detect advanced cloaking technology through sheer persistence and cooperation. There's more, Mira XE continued, their bioluminescence now pulsing in patterns of disbelief. They're broadcasting welcome messages in over 3,000 languages and mathematical sequences, including perfect translations in 12 extinct alien languages they couldn't possibly know. How? Zytok demanded, their crystalline form clouding with confusion. They say they got the language databases from something called science fiction movies and video games, Mira XE explained. Apparently, they'd been rehearsing first contact scenarios as entertainment for over a century. Vexna moved to the main viewport, studying the distant blue marble that was becoming more fascinating by the moment. They've been preparing for us before they even knew we existed. Yes, Director, and they're inviting us to something called a welcome party. The message says, and I quote, "We have snacks, we come in peace, and we promise not to post your landing on TikTok without consent." The research team stood in silence, processing this development. Everything about this species defied conventional xenological understanding. They weren't supposed to be able to detect the ship. They weren't supposed to have protocols for this situation. And they certainly weren't supposed to be treating potential contact with an alien civilization as an excuse for social gathering. Director Zytok spoke carefully, the ancient archives warning about this being a Category 5 Deathworld. Yes, I'm beginning to think it wasn't about the planet's conditions at all. It was about them. Vexna's spines rippled in agreement as she made a decision that would change galactic history. Prepare for first contact protocols. But first, access their information networks and find out what these snacks are. If we're going to ignore thousands of years of warnings about this species, we might as well know what we're getting ourselves into. As the Eternal Curiosity began its approach to Earth, none of its crew realized that humanity's ability to spot their ship wasn't the most surprising thing they would discover that day. The real shock would come when they learned why humans called coffee survival juice, and why the ancient archives had a specific warning about never, ever letting humans get bored. The first contact was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The coffee incident, the first official meeting between humanity and the galactic community, was being held in a place called Dave's Diner in rural Montana. This was not, as Vexna had repeatedly explained to her superiors, part of the standard first contact protocol. But when the humans had learned that the alien delegation could survive in Earth's atmosphere, they had insisted on something more casual than another stuffy UN meeting. "More sugar with your coffee, Han?" asked Dave, a human male with facial hair that reminded Vexna of certain toxic fungal growths from her homeworld. She watched in fascinated horror as her diplomatic counterpart, Dr. Sarah Chen, casually poured the dark liquid into her oral intake cavity for the 7th time. The humans, Zytok transmitted privately to Vexna through their crystalline resonance channel, are constantly ingesting a toxic stimulant while conducting diplomatic negotiations, and they're offering it to us. Fascinating and terrifying. Vexna responded on the same private channel. Our biochemical analysis shows it contains enough compounds to be classified as a Class 3 metabolic stimulant. They're drinking it like water. Dr. Chen smiled warmly at the alien delegation, completely unaware of their internal communication. "I hope you don't mind meeting here. We figured it would be more comfortable than a formal setting. Plus, Dave makes the best coffee in 3 counties." Mira Xe, who had been tasked with cultural observation, was frantically documenting everything. Their bioluminescent patches were flickering so rapidly with new data that they resembled what humans called a disco ball. "Dr. Chen," Vexna began carefully, "our scans indicate that this coffee contains numerous psychoactive compounds. Yet you consume it multiple times daily." "Oh yeah," Dave chimed in from behind the counter. "Doc here usually goes through a whole pot herself during breakfast. Helps her wake up." The alien delegation's universal translators took several moments to process this, trying to find a logical interpretation that didn't imply humans deliberately induced daily controlled overdoses of stimulants to achieve normal functionality. "You need this to wake up?" Zytok asked, their crystalline form clouding with concern. "Well, need is a strong word," Dr. Chen laughed, taking another sip. "But it sure makes mornings easier, especially after staying up late working on xenolinguistics and first contact protocols. You willingly delay your rest cycle to study, then use chemical stimulants to force your body to function normally." Vexna's spines were fully erect in alarm. "And this is common?" "Oh, you should see finals week at the universities," Dave added helpfully. "Had a group of students in here last month who went through 5 pots of coffee in one sitting. They were studying for quantum mechanics or something." Mira Xe's tendrils began to twist in agitation. They overdose on stimulants to force their brains to process quantum mathematics. "Director, this explains so much about their technological progression. They're literally burning their neurons to accelerate their development." Dr. Chen looked bemused. "It's really not that dramatic. Coffee's perfectly safe. Most of us have been drinking it since adolescence." The entire alien delegation froze. Even Zytok's crystalline form stopped its usual subtle shifting. "You give this to your juveniles?" Vexna asked, her translator struggling to maintain professional tones. "Well, not too young. Usually teens start with sweeter coffee drinks. You know, frappuccinos, lattes, that sort of thing." Dr. Chen gestured to the menu board, which to the aliens now looked like a list of increasingly dangerous neurotoxin combinations. "Director," Zytok transmitted privately, "I'm beginning to understand why the ancient archives classified this as a Category 5 Deathworld. It's not just the humans' resilience. It's their complete lack of what any sane species would consider self-preservation instincts." Before Vexna could respond, Dr. Chen's communication device emitted a sound. The human checked it and brightened considerably. "Oh, perfect timing. The International Space Station crew is doing their weekly live broadcast. They wanted to say hello." She turned her device to show a video feed of humans floating in a space habitat, all holding sealed containers of what the aliens now recognize with horror as coffee. "Greetings from humanity's home away from home," one of the astronauts announced cheerfully. "We thought we'd share our morning coffee with our new galactic neighbors. In space, we have to use special containers with straws, but it's worth the effort." Mira X's observational appendages drooped in disbelief. They take it into space. They considered bringing neurotoxins essential for space exploration. "Well, of course," Dr. Chen replied, apparently interpreting their horror as interest. "Can't have astronauts falling asleep on the job. Though I hear the Russians prefer tea." "Different neurotoxin, same principle," Zytok transmitted privately to Vexna. "Director, when we report this, no one will believe us." "Actually," Dave interrupted, wiping down the counter, "speaking of space and coffee, did you folks want to hear about the time NASA had to design a special coffee cup for zero gravity? Cost millions in research, but by golly, they figured it out." The alien delegation listened in stunned silence as Dave explained how humans had dedicated significant scientific resources to ensuring they could properly consume their daily stimulants in space. It was simultaneously impressive and terrifying. A perfect encapsulation of humanity itself. "Director," Mira Xe transmitted on the private channel, "I suggest we classify coffee as a Class 1 restricted substance and never, ever mention its existence to the metabolic purists in the Galactic Council." "Agreed," Vexna responded, watching Dr. Chen pour her 8th cup. "Though I suspect keeping anything about humanity secret is going to prove challenging." As if to prove her point, Dr. Chen smiled brightly and asked, "So, would any of you like to try some? Dave makes a great decaf too, if you're worried about the caffeine." The alien delegation would later learn this was humanity's first attempt at chemical warfare. They just called it sharing and genuinely meant it as a gesture of friendship. It was going to be a very interesting first contact indeed. Lessons in human resilience. 3 Earth weeks after the coffee incident, Vexna found herself questioning everything she knew about xenobiology. Her research team had been granted permission to observe human activities across their planet, and each new discovery seemed more impossible than the last. "They're doing it again," Zytok reported, their crystalline form flickering with distress as they monitored a human settlement in something called Minnesota. "The temperature is well below freezing, and they're voluntarily going outside. Some are even removing protective layers. For recreation," Mira Xe added, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with bewilderment. "They call it making snow angels. They lie down in frozen precipitation and move their limbs in patterns. For fun." Vexna's spines rippled in disbelief as she watched the footage. Their human liaison, Dr. Chen, had tried to explain the concept of playing in the snow, but seeing it was different. Humans didn't just survive in conditions that would kill most species, they enjoyed them. "Update from the Australia monitoring team," another researcher announced. "Humans there are experiencing temperatures that would cook most carbon-based life forms. Their response is to gather in large numbers on something called a beach and deliberately expose themselves to even more solar radiation, while consuming more stimulants, Zytok noted, though this time it's something cold called beer instead of coffee. Vexna's attention was drawn to a new alert from their monitoring systems. What's happening in this region they call Florida? The research team gathered around the holographic display, watching as a human male casually removed a large predator from his dwelling. The creature, which their database identified as an alligator, could easily bite the human in half. The human was talking to it as if it were a mildly annoying pet. "Just another Tuesday, Bob," the human was saying to the ancient killing machine. "We talked about this. The pool is for people, not gators." Director Mira Xe's tendrils were trembling. "I've analyzed their historical records. Humans didn't defeat their planet's apex predators through superior technology. They just decided to live alongside them. Some humans even keep predators as companions." As if to emphasize this point, their monitors showed various humans across the planet casually interacting with creatures that would be classified as extreme hazards on any other world. Dogs descended from wolves, cats that were essentially miniature versions of their most deadly hunters, and in some places, actual wolves, and big cats living in human homes. "The more I observe them," Zytok transmitted privately to Vexna, "the more I suspect humans aren't actually aware that they're living on a Deathworld. They seem to think this is all normal." Their discussion was interrupted by Dr. Chen's arrival at their observation post. She was carrying another cup of coffee, naturally, and wearing what she had called a light jacket, despite temperatures that should have required thermal protection. "Hope you don't mind me dropping by," she said cheerfully. "I thought you might like to observe something interesting. We're getting reports of a major storm system forming off the coast, and some locals are preparing for something called storm surfing." "Storm surfing?" Vexna asked, dreading the answer. "Oh yes," Dr. Chen grinned. "When the waves get really big, some people like to ride them on boards. It's quite spectacular, though maybe not as exciting as what they do in Tornado Alley. Storm chasers there actually drive toward cyclones to study them up close." The research team watched in horror as Dr. Chen pulled up video footage of humans deliberately approaching massive atmospheric disturbances, their tiny ground vehicles insignificant against the fury of their planet's weather systems. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Dr. Chen continued, mistaking their horror for scientific interest. "Humans have always had this drive to explore extreme conditions. Did you know we have people living in Antarctica? And others who climb mountains so high they need oxygen tanks. There's even a group planning to establish a permanent settlement on Mars." Mira Xe's observational appendages were working overtime, recording everything. "Dr. Chen, these activities, they result in human casualties, correct?" "Well, sometimes," she admitted. "But that's why we study safety procedures, develop better equipment, and train for emergencies. It's all part of pushing the boundaries of what's possible." "You mean pushing the boundaries of what should be survivable?" Zytok transmitted to Vexna. "Director, I'm beginning to think we should revise the Deathworld classification system. Earth isn't just a Category 5. It's breaking the scale entirely." Vexna was about to respond when their monitors caught something unusual. "Dr. Chen, what are those humans doing in that frozen lake?" "Oh, ice fishing. It's a popular winter activity. People cut holes in the ice and fish through them. Sometimes they even build little houses on the ice to make it more comfortable." The alien researchers processed this. Humans deliberately set up temporary dwellings on frozen water to hunt aquatic life for recreation. Not for survival. Not out of necessity. For fun. "Would any of you like to try it?" Dr. Chen asked brightly. "I know a great spot, and the ice is nice and thick this time of year. We could make a day of it." As her team's vital signs all shifted to indicate various levels of panic, Vexna made a decision. It was time to update their first contact protocols. Clearly, the standard guidelines for assessing species survival capabilities hadn't taken into account the possibility of encountering beings who didn't just survive impossible conditions, but actively sought them out for entertainment. Perhaps, she said carefully, we could start with something less adventurous. Of course, Dr. Chen replied. How about we visit the local wildlife sanctuary instead? They just got a new rescued bear. She's very friendly. Somewhere in the ancient archives, Vexna was sure, there was a warning about this exact situation. She just wished she'd paid more attention to it before agreeing to study humanity up close. The Galactic emergency. The emergency alert came during what humans called movie night. Dr. Chen had insisted on showing the alien delegation classic science fiction films to, as she put it, see how close we got to guessing what you'd be like. The fact that humans had been imagining and preparing for alien contact through entertainment for over a century was still something Vexna's team was trying to process. The alert cut through their ship's communications with the urgent screech reserved for galaxy-wide emergencies. A quantum anomaly had been detected in the Carina arm of the galaxy, and it was expanding at an alarming rate. The Harmony Collective's containment field is failing, Zytok reported, their crystalline form clouded with concern. Their most advanced technology can't maintain stability against the quantum fluctuations. The Collective? Dr. Chen asked, pausing the movie where an improbably shaped alien was just about to burst from someone's chest. Those are the ones you mentioned who specialize in quantum engineering, right? Yes, Vexna confirmed, her spines rippling with anxiety. They're one of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. If they can't contain this, can we see the data? Dr. Chen asked, already pulling out her communication device. I know some people who might have ideas. Within hours, humanity's response to the crisis defied all galactic protocols and expectations. Instead of carefully channeling requests through proper diplomatic channels, they had somehow mobilized a global network of scientists, engineers, and what they called crazy-enough-to-work specialists. Let me get this straight, Dr. Chen said, now on her fourth cup of emergency coffee as she coordinated with teams worldwide. The containment field keeps failing because the quantum fluctuations are too unpredictable. Correct, Mira Xe confirmed, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with stress. The collective systems can't adapt fast enough to the chaotic changes. So we need something that thrives on chaos, Dr. Chen mused. Something that doesn't just adapt to unpredictability, but actually works better with it. She grinned suddenly, like a human brain on caffeine. You're not suggesting. Vexna began, her translator struggling to convey her mix of horror and fascination. Oh yes, I am. Dr. Chen was already sending messages. We're going to solve this with coffee, chaos, and what we call jazz improvisation. What followed was perhaps the most unorthodox approach to quantum physics in galactic history. Human scientists, powered by concerning amounts of stimulants, began proposing solutions that seemed to violate several laws of physics and common sense. See, we're thinking about this wrong, explained Dr. Rodriguez, a physicist who had been awake for what humans considered a concerning but not unusual amount of time. Instead of trying to predict and contain the quantum fluctuations, we need to dance with them. Dance with quantum physics. Zytok's crystalline form flickered in confusion. Exactly. Dr. Rodriguez gestured at a holographic display covered in equations that somehow incorporated principles from human jazz music. We need to stop trying to force order on chaos and start working with it, like improvising musicians playing off each other. That's completely insane, Mira Xe observed, their tendrils waving in agitation. Exactly why it might work, Dr. Chen added. We humans have a saying, crazy enough to work. It's practically our species' motto. To everyone's surprise except perhaps the humans, it did work. The solution involved synchronizing containment field adjustments to what they called quantum jazz, a seemingly chaotic but internally consistent pattern based on human musical improvisation principles. I don't understand, one of the Harmony Collective's representatives transmitted. How did you even conceive of such an approach? Oh, we got the idea from a cat video, Dr. Rodriguez explained cheerfully. You know how cats always land on their feet. They don't calculate their landing. They flow with the motion. We just applied that principle to quantum physics. Plus, someone had recently spilled coffee on our quantum probability calculations, and the coffee stain pattern actually helped us visualize the solution. The alien delegation watched in amazement as humanity's apparently random approach brought the quantum anomaly under control. The containment field, now operating on principles that would give any traditional quantum physicist a headache, was working better than ever. You know what this means? Dr. Chen asked, raising her coffee cup in a gesture humans called the toast. That human chaos theory has applications in quantum mechanics. Vexna ventured. That too. But more importantly, it means humanity just helped solve a galactic crisis by applying principles from jazz, cat videos, and coffee stains. She grinned. I believe that officially makes us part of the galactic community. Director, Zytok transmitted privately to Vexna. I'm beginning to think we should revise our understanding of what constitutes proper scientific methodology. Agreed, Vexna responded, watching as human scientists celebrated their success with yet more coffee and something they called pizza. Though perhaps we should wait until they've slept before asking them to explain exactly how they did it. Bold of you to assume they plan to sleep anytime soon, Mira Xe observed. They're already talking about applying these principles to something called faster-than-light travel. Apparently, someone got the idea while watching their entertainment program called Star Trek, as the humans excitedly discussed using their new quantum jazz principles to revolutionize space travel. Vexna made a note to update the ancient archives. Earth wasn't just a Category 5 death world. It was the home of a species that had turned surviving the impossible into an art form. And now they were teaching that art to the galaxy. Welcome to the neighborhood. The Galactic Council's emergency session regarding Earth's classification was in its fourth cycle, and Vexna was beginning to understand why humans invented coffee. The council chamber, filled with representatives from hundreds of spacefaring civilizations, buzzed with a mixture of concern and fascination. Let me be clear. Council Elder Xithmal's holographic form flickered with agitation. You're proposing we not only remove Earth's Category 5 death world status, but also grant them full membership in the galactic community, after confirming that every single warning in the ancient archives was actually an understatement. Not exactly, Vexna replied, her spines rippling diplomatically. We're proposing a new classification entirely. Earth isn't just a death world. It's the homeworld of a species that treats the impossible as a personal challenge. The evidence displays activated, showing humans engaging in what they considered normal activities. Mountain climbing without anti-gravity aids. Deep-sea exploration with what the Council considered woefully inadequate protection. Voluntary skydiving from perfectly functional aircraft. And let's not forget, Zytok added, their crystalline form-shifting colors for emphasis. They solved the quantum anomaly crisis using principles derived from their entertainment media and accidental beverage spills. Speaking of beverages, another council member interjected, is it true they deliberately cultivate and consume natural stimulants? Ah yes, coffee. Mira Xe's bioluminescent patches pulsed with what had become a resigned acceptance. We've prepared a special report on that particular aspect of human culture. Though I should warn you, some of the consumption statistics may be disturbing. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as they reviewed the data on human caffeine consumption. Several energy-based life forms actually dimmed in horror, and they want to share this substance with other species. A crystalline elder asked, their form clouding with concern. They want to share everything, Vexna explained. That's perhaps their most remarkable trait. Humans don't just survive their death world. They want to teach others how to enjoy it too. The display shifted to footage from the previous week. Human scientists enthusiastically teaching representatives from various species their quantum jazz principles, complete with impromptu music demonstrations and an alarming amount of coffee. Several alien researchers had already adopted the human practice of using stimulants to push through complex problems, leading to breakthroughs in various fields and minor chaos in several research institutions. "They're changing how we approach everything," Zytok reported. "The Harmony Collective is incorporating human chaos theory into their quantum engineering. The stellar architects are studying human playground equipment for space station designs. Even the metabolic purists are cautiously experimenting with something humans called defy. And the dangers." Council Elder Xithmal pressed. "Surely their influence could destabilize our established protocols." "Oh, it absolutely will," Vexna agreed cheerfully, noting with amusement how much her speech patterns had begun to mirror Dr. Chen's. "But consider this. Every crisis we faced as a galactic community has been approached with logical, standardized procedures. Perhaps what we need is a species that looks at the impossible and says, 'Hold my coffee, I have an idea.'" The council chamber filled with various expressions of agreement, concern, and resignation, often all three at once. Finally, Elder Xithmal spoke again. "Very well. Earth will be reclassified as a— what did the humans suggest we call it? A challenge-accepted world." Mira Xe supplied, their tendrils waving with amusement. They insisted on the quotation marks. "And their status in the galactic community. We're proposing full membership," Vexna stated, "with a few unique provisions. All human innovations must be tested in controlled conditions before general adoption. Their stimulants require special licensing, and any human suggestion beginning with the phrase, 'Hey, watch this,' must be thoroughly reviewed by a safety committee." They agreed to these terms. "They suggested most of them," Zytok noted. "Apparently, they've learned from experience. They even helped design warning labels for human-inspired activities. Warning: this procedure was developed by beings who considered jumping out of spacecraft a recreational activity." The council's final vote was unanimous, though several members seemed to be operating on the human principle of "what's the worst that could happen?" a phrase that had already been banned in most research facilities. Later, at the ceremonial welcome reception, Dr. Chen raised her coffee cup in a toast. "To the galaxy's first officially recognized, challenge-accepted world. May we continue to solve impossible problems in improbable ways." "To humanity," Vexna replied, raising her own cup of what humans called hot chocolate, a somewhat less potent but equally beloved stimulant. "The species that looked at the universe's deadliest challenges and said, 'That looks fun.'" As the celebration continued, news arrived that human scientists had already begun applying their chaotic innovation principles to other galactic challenges. Reports came in of quantum physics breakthroughs inspired by cat behavior, spacecraft designs based on skateboard tricks, and a revolutionary new faster-than-light drive concept that somehow involved principles derived from making perfect toast. Director Zytok transmitted privately to Vexna, "Do you ever wonder if the ancient archives' warnings were less about protecting us from humans and more about protecting us from ourselves once we met them?" Vexna watched as a human engineer enthusiastically explained to a group of stellar architects how playground slide designs could improve space station evacuation systems. "Perhaps," she replied, "or maybe they just knew the galaxy wasn't ready for humanity's particular brand of innovative chaos." And now, Vexna's spines rippled with amusement as she watched humanity begin to transform the galaxy, one impossible solution at a time. Now the galaxy doesn't have a choice. The humans are here, they're caffeinated, and they're ready to help whether we're ready or not. As if to prove her point, Dr. Chen was already organizing a group to tackle the supposedly impossible problem of interdimensional communication. Her proposed solution involved principles derived from jazz music, quantum physics, and something called memes. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was probably exactly what it needed.